The Fall of Detroit, August the 16th, 1812. Note, the history of this non-battle is covered in most books on the War of 1812. In this video, I will be relying mainly on the account from The Astonishing General, The Life and Legacy of Sir Isaac Brock by Wesley B. Turner. On August the 13th, General Brock had arrived at Fort Malden in present-day Emmitsburg, Ontario, after a grueling week-long trip from York, present-day Toronto, primarily by small boats in rough weather. He immediately calls a council of war, at which occurs his famous meeting with the Shawnee leader, Tecumseh. Tecumseh, who reportedly turns to his followers to give his opinion of Brock. Quote, "This is a man." Because of the documents captured during the seizure of the American ship Cuyahoga Packet on July the 2nd, supplemented by further papers captured by Tecumseh during the skirmish at Brownstown on August 5th, Brock is well aware of the dissension and low morale of the U.S. troops under the command of Brigadier General William Hall. After his proposal to cross the river and attack Fort Detroit is seconded by Lieutenant Colonel Robert Nichol, Quartermaster General of the militia, Brock makes up his mind to attack. During this meeting, Tecumseh, quote, taking a roll of elm bark and extending it on the ground, drew forth his scalping knife, and with the point presently edged upon the back a plan of the country, its hills, woods, rivers, morasses, and roads, a plan which was fully as intelligible as if a surveyor had prepared it. End of quote. Turner notes that while the above incident may never have happened, it does illustrate the working relationship between Tecumseh and Brock. A battery consisting of 3 guns and 2 mortars had been constructed across from Fort Detroit by Captain Hall of the Provincial Marine, and once completed, on August the 15th, Brock demands Hull's immediate surrender, but Hull refuses, and the battery opens fire. The Americans will return fire, but without result. Hull had materially weakened his position, largely for political reasons. On August the 14th, in order to remove some officers who were plotting against him, Hull had ordered 350 of the Ohio militia under Colonels Lewis Cass and Duncan MacArthur to go to the River Raisin in order to escort a stalled supply column to Detroit. The militiamen are ordered back to Detroit that same night, but dally, and are not a serious factor in the upcoming confrontation. Not that Hull has much luck with the regular army either. He posts Colonel Josiah Snelling in command of a gun at Spring Wells, south of Detroit, the most likely British landing spot. But Snelling withdraws without orders on the 16th, leaving the place undefended. Why he did this, I do not know, but as a result, the British landings are unopposed. On the evening of the 15th/16th, 600 native warriors under Tecumseh and Colonel Matthew Elliott, District Superintendent of the Indian Department, cross the river and begin circling through the woods to create the impression of far greater numbers. Brock, having read Hull's correspondence, and thus his mind, well knows the American commander's fear of a massacre by native warriors. He even concludes his demand for surrender with the ominous words, quote, "The force at my disposal authorizes me to require of you the immediate surrender of Fort Detroit. It is far from my inclination to join in a war of extermination, but you must be aware that the numerous body of Indians who have attached themselves to my troop will be beyond control the moment the contest commences." End of quote. Yikes! Brock's force of 700 men, with 2 3-pound guns and 3 6-pound guns, cross in the morning, landing at, you guessed it, Spring Wells. The 300 militiamen, under Brock's command, are clad in discarded redcoats from the 41st Regiment to create the impression of a larger body of regular troops. The invasion is supported by the provincial marine ships Queen Charlotte and General Hunter. Brock's initial plan was to use his artillery to lure Hull's forces from the fort for a direct confrontation, but on hearing a rumor that Colonel MacArthur and 500 men were only 3 miles away and approaching the fort, Brock decides on an immediate attack. It is a desperate plan, as the fort was a strong defensive position, and Brock, in his red uniform at the head of his troops, would have been a tempting target for its 24-pound guns. And then the unthinkable happens. Hull surrenders. Pierre Berton describes what happens as the disintegration of William Hull. Prior to the War of 1812, William Hull had been a Revolutionary War hero, serving as governor of Michigan Territory. He said he had declined to command the Northwestern Army when the post had been offered to him, and that he had told the U.S. government that it needed command of Lake Erie in order to win the war, which turned out to be true. But for whatever reason, Hull was to accept the command in April 1812, when he was 59 years old and recovering from a stroke suffered the previous year. Source: The War of 1812, Conflict for a Continent by J.A.C. Stagg. As Brigadier General, Hull can best be described as a vacillating ditherer, who quickly loses the respect of the regulars and militia under his command. Although many of the men in the army are poorly led, poorly fed, and insubordinate. What I'm trying to say is that Hull has no reason to have confidence in them either. It is a recipe for disaster, and it ends in one. Turner quotes J.A.C. Stagg's description of Hull's lurid behavior during the battle for Detroit. Quote, "Thereafter, possibly under the influence of alcohol and narcotics, combined with the effects of his earlier stroke, his, i.e. General Hull's, behavior became increasingly disordered. His speech became indistinct. He dribbled incessantly, and he took to crouching in the corners of the fort." End of quote. Was Hull having another stroke? I pose that as a serious question. In his biography of Brock, The Astonishing General, Wesley B. Turner suggests the following reasons for Hull's capitulation. 1. That Brock and Tecumseh's subterfuge leads Hull to believe the army confronting him is 3 times its actual size. Leads him to believe he is outnumbered. 2. Hull has no idea where the hell MacArthur and Cass are, and if they are coming to the rescue. They're not. 3. The effectiveness of British artillery fire. One shot even kills the unfortunate Lieutenant Porter Hanks, awaiting court-martial for having surrendered Fort Mackinac. So effective and intimidating, Hull refuses to fire back. And lastly, fear of massacre. The Americans were afraid of massacre by native warriors, a fear Brock plays upon. And Hull is not just afraid for the people in the fort, which include his daughter and grandchildren, but for the people of Michigan Territory as well. Perhaps Hull was remembering his own proclamation to the people of Upper Canada when he stated, quote, "No white man found fighting by the side of an Indian will be taken prisoner. Instant destruction will be his lot." End of quote. Well, what goes around may come around. Hull had dispatched an officer with a flag of truce to the Canadian side of the river and ordered a white flag hung over the fort. The officer returns, as only Brock has the authority to call a ceasefire, and so Colonels Elijah Brush and James Miller are sent to make what terms they can. And thus, 2,188 men, including the men with Cass and MacArthur, are surrendered. Brock allows the militiamen to return to their homes, but the 582 regulars, including Hull, are sent as prisoners to Quebec City. It was a coup de maître on the part of General Brock, who with one dare changed the entire course of the war. I believe the fall of Detroit ultimately led to two separate conclusions. One, Canada becoming a separate country, separate from the U.S. No victory at Detroit, no Canada, or at least no Ontario. And two, the continuation of the war, for the Americans now had to retake Michigan, and hence another year of war and of death. As for Hull, he would eventually be tried by court-martial and found guilty of cowardice and neglect of duty. He is sentenced to death, but is pardoned by President Madison and spends the remainder of his life justifying his conduct. He will die in 1825. But was Hull correct to surrender? The surrender prevented bloodshed and loss of life, at least for a time. A video on the YouTube channel, the Lenawee or Lenawee Trekker, a video called Elizabeth Park, the Battle of Monguagon, link in description, asks the question, was Hull a traitor, coward, or visionary? What do you think, dear listeners? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have a suggestion for a War of 1812 book for us to read? Then please share them in the comments as well. Our next September book will be The War of 1812 in the Age of Napoleon by Jeremy Black. So please drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and please consider subscribing to our channel, where we chronicle and discuss the events of the War of 1812. My current goal is 100 subscribers. Won't you help me achieve it? When the barrage lifts, cheers! The thumbnail image for today's video is courtesy of Pix Here, that's PX Here, while the images of Brock's Monument and the Tecumseh Memorial are courtesy of Greg M. The music was 5 Armies by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod. Thank you for listening.